What I'm going to talk about today is just, in general terms, what is needed to address the climate crisis. And this is the thing that, if we do, what actions can we take that will accelerate the transition out of the fossil fuel era? So there's a certain amount of carbon that is circulating through the environment. So it's going into the air, being absorbed by, and then getting absorbed by plants and animals, and then going back into the air. And this carbon is just circulating on the surface. And this is fine, and it's been doing that for millions, hundreds of millions of years. The thing that's changed is that we've added something to the mix. So this is what I would call the sort of the turd in the punch bowl. So we added all this extra carbon to the carbon cycle, and the net result is that the carbon in the ocean's atmosphere is growing over time. It's much more than can be absorbed by the ecosystem. It's really quite simple. We're taking billions of tons of carbon that's been buried for hundreds of millions of years and is not part of the carbon cycle, taking it from deep underground and adding it to the carbon cycle. The result is that a steady increase in the carbon in the atmosphere and in the oceans, which doesn't look like much if you look at it on this chart, but when looked at in the context of history, it actually looks like this. So the carbon parts per million has really been bouncing around the 300 level for around 10 million years. And then in the last few hundred years, it went into a vertical climb. This is the essence of the problem. This is very unusual and a very, very extreme threat, as you can see from this rate of growth. Then this is accompanied by a temperature increase, as one would expect. And this temperature increase, if people talk about 2 degrees or 3 degrees, it's important to appreciate just how sensitive the climate actually is to temperature. And it's important to look at it in terms of absolute temperature, not in degrees Celsius relative to 0. We need to say, what is the temperature change relative to absolute 0? That's how the universe thinks about temperature. It's how physics thinks about temperature. It's relative to absolute 0. So for small changes result in huge effects. So New York City under ice would be minus 5 degrees. New York City underwater would be plus 5 degrees. But looked at as a percentage relative to absolute 0, it's only a plus minus 2% change. So the sensitivity of the climate is extremely high. We've amplified this sensitivity by building our cities right on the coastline, and most people live very close to the ocean. There are some countries, of course, that are very low-lying and would be completely underwater in a climate crisis. So we've essentially designed civilization to be super sensitive to climate change. The important thing to appreciate is that we are going to exit the fossil fuels era. So it is inevitable that we will exit the fossil fuels era because at a certain point we will simply run out of carbon to mine and burn. So the question is really, when do we exit the era, not if? The goal is to exit the era as quickly as possible. That means we need to move from the old goal, with the pre-industrial goal, which was to move from chopping down forests and killing lots of whales. The old goal was to move from chopping wood and killing whales to fossil fuels, which actually, in that context, was a good thing. But the new goal is to move to a sustainable energy future. And we want to use things like hydro, solar, wind, geothermal. Nuclear is also a good option in places like France, which aren't subject to natural disasters. And we want to use energy sources that will be good for 1 billion years. So how do we accelerate this transition away from fossil fuels to a sustainable era? And what happens if we don't? So if we wait, and if we delay the change, the best case, the